This is episode number 16 of the Silver Track Extra.
Thanks for tuning in to the Silver Track Extra, your source for the best tips, tricks, and how-tos to dominate the security industry, helping you improve your business, win more contracts, and crush your competition. Here are your hosts, Chris Anderson and Johnny Page.
What's up, Silver Track Nation, and welcome to episode number 16 of the Silver Track Extra. Today we're talking about 4 techniques for collecting on past due accounts without losing the client. I'm very excited to share this information with you guys today, as this seems to be a problem that a lot of security operators face, especially early on in your company's history. So you won't want to miss the content today. But before we get to that featured conversation, let's hear from our sponsors over at Paperless Proposal.
Developed for mid to large security companies, Paperless Proposal is the #1 enterprise-level cloud-based proposal creation and management solution. Use it to create, send, track, and manage highly customized proactive or RFP proposals. Differentiate your company and win more business with this powerful proposal generation software that can include office files, video, templates, pricing tools, CRM integration, and e-signature approval. Contact us for a free demo at www.paperlessproposal.com/silvertrack.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the featured conversation here on episode number 16, where we're going to talk about 4 techniques for collecting on past due accounts without losing the client. And Chris, if you've been in the security industry for seemingly like anything more than a month, you've probably had to deal with some past due accounts. So give us a little insight on how you address this, and let's kick off this 4 techniques for collecting on past due accounts.
Well, here's what I did. When I had my company, I moved to a location where the mail delivered in the morning so I could see if I was going to meet payroll, all right? Because it was a huge problem, all right? Clients get busy. They come up with all kinds of excuses. I hate to put it that way, but those of you that are dealing with the apartment communities out there, you know, it's all up to the leasing manager or the assistant manager to make sure that your invoice is submitted properly. If they don't have that information, it rolls into the next month, and we're not the Bank of America, so it's pretty hard for us to fund our payroll and pay for our guards, and we can't get paid on time. So we have to, without a doubt, get in there and learn who is the one that collects our invoices and submits our invoices.
Yeah, Chris, cash flow seems to be like the Achilles heel of a lot of companies in those really beginning stages. And if you don't have a quality process in place for collecting on those past due accounts, it could really tank your business. You could be doing everything right. And I think that happened to you, right? In your career, you're doing everything right on the security side. You grow way too fast and you lose out on the business because cash flow is an issue.
Yeah. Well, we all do a very good job, and I think anybody out there, our listeners, can honestly say when you start a new account, our intentions, we are always putting our best foot forward, right? And we put the hard work in for 90 days, and the last thing we want to do is not get paid on time for it. Your accounting person in your own operation, they better have a pretty good personality, right? Because it's a very difficult thing to do. So if they're calling your clients and they're pointing fingers and they're upset, or their tone of voice, I mean, it can delay that invoice a lot longer, right? So you better have that in check. You better have somebody that's, you know, being able to take those punches, so to speak, when they're out doing collections, when you do get behind.
Yeah, which this is technique number 1, is using a personal touch. So do things like avoiding conflict, especially in that first outreach when you're saying, hey, the invoice is past due. The first contact, assume that this was a mistake. It was just oversight on the customer's behalf. Absolutely avoid creating a confrontational environment or a conversation with the customer, because the chances of you collecting on that immediately drop significantly when you start creating a confrontational situation. So, you know, do things like avoiding pointing the fingers and just express understanding and empathy. Assume it was oversight and just give them the benefit of the doubt rather than rushing to, you know, judgment so quickly.
Well, John, you know, you bring up a good point, and I think everybody, again, listening is going to go, yeah, that sounds great, John, I get it. But, you know, that's every month. We do that, right?
Yeah.
So for those, you know, here's what I did. Here's just a few things. What I like to do is I like to contact the customer or the accounts payable person. I like to find out who they are. All right. And when do they submit invoices? What can I do? Let's just call her for Kathy in the accounting for today's, purpose. Kathy, when should I submit an invoice to you so it's not late, so we can meet our payroll on this end? As you know, it's a pretty tough business, and we've got a lot of payroll. So, Kathy, what's the best time, or when should we submit this invoice so it doesn't get delayed? And do you have everything you need from us? Do you have the workers' comp certificates and the general liability certificates? Because it's a famous line from all of them. Well, we never got this certificate, or we weren't aware. So is there anything that I can get you that you're missing so we can make sure that everything gets submitted on time? And that prevents a lot of the problems that we're talking about today. At least it helped me.
Yeah, so maybe this is like technique 1.5 is be flexible in the way you invoice, and just making sure that you're matching that to their operation. So I know on our end, Chris, we are flexible on SilverTrack side of setting a billing date that works for the customer, right? So, and you can do the same in the security industry as well. So technique number 2 that we for collecting on past due accounts would be bringing in an additional party. Sometimes, this has gone through a couple of attempts with the original contact, and it may be time to start bringing in the boss of the individual. Maybe you want to loop in the regional manager for some of these properties, but just bringing some additional contacts to the table just to make them aware of the situation, because you don't want to have to result to stopping service or sending them over to collection. Yeah.
Or a bribe.
Right.
Sorry, Johnny. I couldn't help that. Yeah, I tell you, I even got to that point where I really needed to. I felt like I needed to do that.
Something tells me that there's a story behind that.
Oh, there is. Always is. Always is.
Yeah. Well, you don't need to say much when you're doing this. When you're bringing in the additional party, whether it is the higher up or even like an account manager that you're working with daily, just loop them in and say, hey, I'm assuming that there was some oversight on this. I just need to make sure that we get this resolved before we have to either send this to collections or, discontinue service, because you can't continue to front the payroll and continue to provide service that you're not being paid for.
Yeah, and a good thing to do too, John, is make sure if you're going to do something like that and you're going to go over the head, kind of, so to speak, and send somebody an email, have that information in advance, right? So you don't have to ask that person for her supervisor's email. And what I always did too is, if I found out if you got the information ahead of time and you submit it, how about a coffee card, maybe a little $10 coffee card from Starbucks in the mail, you'd be amazed, man. When it comes to the invoices in front, just a little small donation there, I'll tell you, it really goes a long way. Just to say, hey, thank you for submitting and helping us get paid. You're keeping my company going. And you know what? They don't want to get behind either, because, if they do, they can get in trouble with their boss. They're not supposed to be behind on their bills, but sometimes things happen.
Yeah, this goes into what we discussed in episode number 15 in creating loyal customers. If you have a loyal customer and you've developed the relationship, that's going to make it so much easier to collect on time. So technique number 3 for collecting on past due accounts without losing the client would be using an accounts receivable management app. So this can help provide like a third-party pressure. It provides professional correspondence to let your customer know that there is a set process in place. This isn't just their kid cousin down the street who they can pay whenever they have the money, but that you have a process in place, that you need to stick to that process, and that if things have to escalate, that you will stick to that process. So using this accounts receivable management app, which oftentimes can be an add-on to like your existing accounting package. So whether you're using QuickBooks or something like that, there should be what's equivalent to like a dunning process on the credit card side of things that will set in motion like either email notifications or some sort of workflow that allows you to manage that process, so that at 15 days past due, at 45 days past due, that there's like a set process in place that is held to each time. This will really allow your customer to know that there is that there's a set process in place, and that you're going to be handling this professionally. Although you enjoy the personal relationship you have set up with them, it is not something that's going to be taken advantage of, and that you are serious about getting this collected. And of course, this happens over, this isn't your first resort.
Yeah, no, I like those tools, John, but a lot of people make the mistake of just sticking with those tools, automated, generated emails with the same verbiage and content. Here's your invoice. Thank you very much, right? It doesn't seem personal to me. I've gotten those invoices, and I'm sure you have too, right? I still like a phone call. Hey, how are you? Did you get everything okay? How about a hello before you submit a bill? There's nothing wrong with that. So put that in your calendar, right? And think about it. It's a people business. It really is.
Absolutely. And you need to have that's why technique number one is the personal touch. But I believe you have to have these things in place to avoid just being taken advantage of. Because if you're always a nice guy on the phone, really a lot of times you just don't want to be the nice guy that loses out, right? They need to understand that there is the process in place and that you're in this to make money. You aren't there to provide a charity. You're not there to give discounts or to be 45 days, 60 days past due, because you put hard work on the line in delivering the service, and it's time for them to pony up and pay the bill, right? So using a tool like that can help make sure that there is a clear line in the sand, that although we're friends and we want to have a great business relationship, at the end of the day, we're both in this. We provided a service and it's time to pay for it.
Yeah, and you bring up another good point where you have to set those parameters and how far you're going to go when somebody does get behind. Because I've seen a lot of companies, and I did it myself, where you think the customer's going to pay, they make promises that they're not keeping, and pretty soon you're 30, 60, 90 days behind in payroll, and then they want to negotiate the bill.
Yeah.
They want to cut it in half to get you caught up, and it can really, really hurt you. So it's something to think about. So you need to set those parameters in the very beginning, is how far you're going to go and when you're going to send a termination letter if need to.
Yeah, which this is something to discuss when you're signing the contract, not when it's 90 days past due. You set the expectations right out of the gate so that they know and they've agreed to what you're going to do. So when it comes time to send it to collections or to do some sort of invoice factoring at the 90-day mark, or whatever it may be, that they fully agreed to that before, when things were sunshine and roses.
Right. You have to eliminate, John, all the excuses, right, that they can give you. So that's why it's important to make sure that you got systems and parameters set up to eliminate, I didn't get the insurance certificate, you never called me, oh, my email was down, I didn't know. So you have to set that all up in the meantime. Otherwise, you will get that. You'll get that email. Well, we didn't get it or we didn't receive it.
Yeah.
And you got to stay away from it. Yeah.
So, Chris, the last technique that we've heard tossed around a couple of times in the security industry, and quite frankly, it's not something that I'm terribly familiar with, is invoice factoring. So can you tell us some of the pros and cons, or can you give us such a general overview of what invoice factoring is and when a good situation to use that might be?
Well, I took a look at it when I had my company, and the only problem I didn't like about the factoring, it's obviously we're going to lose a percentage, right, of the monthly. And when you're in larger contracts, I think it leaves you no option, right? Unless you have somebody that's financially backing you up, right? You take on a big contract, that's a big payroll, and if you do get missed, it can bankrupt you. So I liked it for that side, but some of the clients, the smaller clients, didn't like the factoring company because they felt like they were losing touch with me. In other words, I wasn't submitting the invoice at the time. Many years back, the factoring company would actually submit the invoice to them. They didn't like that separation because they felt the need to stay in touch. So I know it's changed in this, from what I hear today, changed a little bit to where now they allow you to submit the invoice and then the checks go to a certain bank. So it kind of takes away that problem that was that I had a while back. But you have to really look at it for payroll. You really have to look at it. If it's a large contract, it's something probably to really consider.
Yeah, and I think just for those of you who aren't familiar with invoice factoring, the overall, I guess in a nutshell, basically a factoring company will assume the debt that's owed to you for a percentage, of course, and then they will work on collecting. So this is like a third party. It's not collections, and it allows you hopefully to maintain that relationship. So they assume the debt. Let's say that they're 90 days past due. They assume the 90-day debt. You continue working, hopefully working on a relationship with a customer to continue paying on time from that point forward. The invoice factoring company then assumes the debt and works on collecting it themselves. So I think, Chris, one of the things that you and I had talked about that we want the listeners of this episode to walk away with is that collections doesn't always have to be such an extreme headache. For some companies, it seems like we come across, a couple of companies here and there that just seem to struggle with this month after month after month. And there really are techniques. There are experts out there, of course, people who are certainly more certified than Chris and I, but there are experts in making sure that you can set up a process that works for your company and that will really help resolve this, because you just don't want cash flow to be something that prohibits you from growing. Well, if you want more information on this, on the subjects that we covered today, the 4.5 techniques that we talked about in collecting on past due accounts, you can visit this episode, the show notes, and a detailed article on what we've discussed here today at silvertracksoftware.com/16, just the number 16. Be sure to check that out. Of course, that's something that you can share across social media. We appreciate all of you out there who are supporters and advocates of the SilverTrack Extra. Show our sponsors some love. Paperless Proposal has got some amazing content over at their website, especially for all of you business development managers and those of you focused on the customer acquisition side of the business. So check them out at paperlessproposal.com/SilverTrack. Until next time, I'm Johnny Page.
I'm Chris Anderson.
This was the SilverTrack Extra, and we'll talk to you soon.